It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Dallas Stars punched their ticket to the Western Conference Final, and on today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Steele and I are going to give our takes about every single angle you need to know about the Seattle Kraken team, fantasy and otherwise, for a very impressive season from a second-year team in the NHL. And, of course, Steele and I have some of the top fantasy players that have improved their value this postseason, both on the Kraken and around the NHL. So you want to be tapped into today's episode. Thank you for joining us. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab. That is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden. You can see his work all across YouTube, including NHL Quick Hits, and, of course, all across the Locked On Podcast Network. And I am your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. I've been out there grinding the Score NHL, CBC, Hockey Night in Canada, a little bit of everything, but that's where you've seen us out there before. And, of course, Monday through Friday on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And thank you for making us your first listen every single day. I just can't wait to get into today's conversation, Steele, and I'm going to tee it up very quickly because the listeners out there need to know. We're going to talk about some of these fantasy pieces specifically on the Seattle Kraken that they do bow out in 7 games. We're going to talk about our Game 7 takeaways, what went wrong for the Kraken, where do they go from here? But some of these players on this Kraken team, Steele, I think really impressed and are going to put them on the radar for some fantasy GMs next season. But perhaps more importantly, Steele and I have some favorites of players around the NHL that have done the same thing, boosting their value for next year's draft. Maybe you can capitalize them at the right time. No big-time bets tonight, Steele, but we got big-time previews for both the Eastern Conference and Western Conference semifinal on Thursday and Friday's episode. So make sure you're tuning into that because I can't wait to break that down with you, Steele. Maybe we'll have a special guest on late time. I got a couple tricks up the sleeve. But why don't I throw it over to you? Kraken put up a great fight. Oh, my goodness. What a good series. And what are your takeaways here? What went wrong for the Seattle Kraken? Or maybe what do you want to talk about from Game 7?
Well, honestly, it was just an unbelievable effort from both sides. You know, you and I were completely wrong with our overtake over 6.5 in this game. The goalie stood out. Grubauer was phenomenal. I'm going to get to Jake Oettinger. But it was an unbelievable effort from both sides. It was fast, clean, physical. Like there was only one penalty for each team. So a very clean game, very physical. All the players out there were just sacrificing, putting their body on the line, putting everything on the line to win this game. And what it comes down to is one of their top performers from the Dallas Stars, which I'm going to get to later in this episode, Roope Hintz getting the first goal of the game, and then a rookie in Wyatt Johnston getting the game winner. So this was an unbelievable Game 7, an unbelievable series. But, you know, I hate to bring it back to the Toronto Maple Leafs some way, but I always have to some why.
Here we go.
If that's the type of effort that the Leafs could put into a series and still lose, I think everything would almost be forgiven at that point. Like if they put the effort in the willness from the Seattle Kraken that we saw in both the first and second round, then almost all would be forgiven for what they put out. But the Kraken have nothing to be ashamed about, everything to be excited about after what they've accomplished this season. You know, to think back to last year, their first year in the league, finishing dead last in the Pacific Division, finished with 60 points in the league as well, going to finishing third in the Pacific now with 100 points. And like, who would have thought about that? We both thought that they were going to miss the playoffs. A lot of people thought they were going to miss the playoffs and kind of written them off. But so they have a lot to be excited about. You know, I think what it came down to is that they don't have a Nathan McKinnon type player. They don't have a Roman Josi on the blue line. They don't have an Andre Vasilevsky in the crease. But nonetheless, they still have a 40-goal scorer in Jared McCann. They have a bright future in Ty Cartier and Matty Beniers. But what it comes down to at the end of that is they ran into Jake Oettinger. and he showed up for Game 7. And yeah, they only put 23. He only faced 23 shots, but it would have been a shutout if he didn't let one in the last 20 seconds of the third period. So they ran into a guy who, again, you and I have been talking about this recently, is debatably top 3, probably top 5 goalie in the league right now.
And here's the thing with the Jake Oettinger take, and I'm going to actually let everything that you just said marinate because it's all on point, and there really is I don't think there's a single reason for, if you're the part of the Seattle fan base, to not be excited for what the future holds. And, does Grubauer play absolutely out of his head for the most part of the postseason, especially in that first round? This is a team that knocked off the reigning Stanley Cup champions in 7 games. And say what you will about the Nichushkin off-ice issues and the roster holes and whatever. That is the reigning Cup champion. And this is a second expansion when, is due. And that's right now when I've been wrong about the Seattle Kraken team. My bad if the Wi-Fi is going a little in and out, people. You know me with my sketchy Wi-Fi. But the Seattle Kraken just deserve all that credit in the world. And you mentioned Jake Oettinger, and that's where I want to go from here. The man bent. He didn't break. He was good when really needed. And I think he was chased 2 times, Steele. Was he chased in both games 3 and 6, I believe?
Yeah,
games 3 and 6, he was chased. So the Kraken really did get to him at times. But again, he bent and he didn't break. And they didn't do it when they really needed it the most, including in Game 7, of course. And this is just one of those things. When you go to the Stanley Cup, baby, you got to grind. And the Dallas Stars have proved that they have been able to grind. And we're going to talk a lot more specifically about the Dallas Stars in the next coming days when we tee up that finale. But Jake Oettinger, they didn't get to him just enough. And they also struggled mightily on the power play, Steele. They just didn't get it done. And the power play was 14.3%. They were 2 for 14 against Dallas in this series. That's not going to get it done. And I think when you have the ability of Jake Oettinger to, really stand in there and take a peppering that he did at times on the balanced attack of the Kraken, they don't have that one guy to really stand out and take the reins. That puts too much pressure on that whole balanced attack. And they didn't score. Played too much from behind as well, and it caught up to them. So 7 games, nothing to be sad for, nothing to even be disappointed in. But there's a couple of pieces that I'm excited to talk about, both on the Kraken, the Stars, and others that have boosted their fantasy value for next season by playing really, really good in this series and in others.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Dallas Stars players, and I'm going to talk about a few of them upcoming for some top performers in the playoffs right now. But for the Seattle Kraken, I think everyone has to look at them at a different light right now. Guys like Vince Dunn, Jared McCann, Yanni Gourde had a fantastic postseason as well. Jordan Eberle, Jaden Schwartz, everyone needs to start looking at them in a different way because of what they accomplished this postseason, this regular season, and some of those guys really just gaining chemistry together in their second year now. So great job overall from the Seattle Kraken. Even their young guys. How about Matty Beniers?
Mid-season add and Eeli Tolvanen as well, 8 points.
Yeah, Eeli Tolvanen, they're the rookie who just jumped into the lineup as well in the postseason. Ty Cartier, 5 points in 10 games. He's got a quick wrister. So
a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, a lot to be proud of for the Seattle Kraken, their fans. Sure. Dave Hackstall has done a phenomenal
job Hackstall
this year. He's been a great addition behind the bench, and just they found a voice, and he's the voice right now. So overall, great season. They came up just a little bit short. They fought their hearts out, but Jake Oettinger was there to kind of ruin their incredible season they just had.
And very lastly, when we come back from the break in a second, I want to talk about, I think, perhaps the most important piece of why the Kraken weren't able to get it done. And that's going to tee us up nicely for talking about the players that we want to talk about, which have already set themselves apart from the pack for next year's draft by playing really nicely and effectively in this postseason. Fantasy-wise, we got to bring it all back to the fantasy, people, because that's what we do. But today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts or accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every part you need fits just right the first time round. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when all the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, baby.
For a third time in 4 seasons, the Miami Heat are squaring off with the Boston Celtics for a trip to the NBA Finals.
I'm expecting Jimmy to be dominant. I'm expecting the Heat bench players to step up.
The Los Angeles Dodgers rolled into the week red hot, boasting the best record in the National League after a sweep of the San Diego Padres.
This Dodgers team is winning with pitching and timely hitting, and those are things that will carry you through in October.
And the Carolina Hurricanes are facing off against the Florida Panthers in the NHL's Eastern Conference Finals.
This is a team that is single-minded in their focus. It's about winning the Stanley Cup.
For more on these stories, check out new episodes of Locked On Heat, Locked On Dodgers, and Locked On Hurricanes. Then check out Locked On's new series, Paving the Way. Each episode will highlight a different voice from across the network, a Locked On host whose journey in the industry has helped to pave the way toward creating a more inclusive and diverse media landscape. That's Paving the Way, presented by State Farm, available now on the Locked On Presents podcast feed.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find a Locked On podcast of your favorite team from all 4 major sports leagues and the NCAA, your team every single day. And of course, you can find us on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Yep. And don't be afraid to leave any comments or DM us on Twitter at LO_FantasyNHL. Flip, the playoffs continue. We are finally at the Western and Eastern Conference Finals now. Carolina Hurricanes taking on the Florida Panthers. The Vegas Golden Knights taking on the Dallas Stars. We are going to be previewing both those conference finals over the next few days, taking a full episode to break them down by each series. But looking forward to the finals. But we have some top playoff performers that we want to highlight who have really boosted their fantasy hockey value for next season's draft. I know you've got a few players. I'll throw it over to you. Who do you want to start off with? There's so many that have stood out.
I do want to start off with a bunch of guys, but very quickly. And we'll start with the Kraken because I wanted to continue that theme. But also, the Seattle Kraken could not contain that top line. And I think, we've talked a lot about them because of how great of a fantasy trio that Roope Hintz, Pavelski, and RoboCop have been. But they just had no response for that top line. So I wanted to kind of segue that into how many good players that have really boosted their value. I know you're going to get to Hintz, so I'll leave that one for you. But in my opinion, I know Phillip Grubauer struggled a little bit in this series, but I think he's proven once again that he still has it. And when you're going up against good teams in the postseason and you can get it done, and now the Seattle team has some confidence headed into next season, why would you not want to take a shot on Phillip Grubauer, especially as maybe a secondary or even a third option in some deeper leagues still? So I wanted to highlight Grubauer as one of those guys who's really boosted his value. But to me, and I know there's obviously a few on the Seattle Kraken and, of course, on the Dallas Stars as well and others, I wanted to start with a guy that, again, hey, hold me down here. I was all over Italy while some of this was going down. But when I caught some angles here, 11 points, 6 goals, and 5 assists from Jordan Eberle. Now, all of a sudden, I'm seeing that this guy still has the hands. He still has that ability to also, I know we talked about junior Jordan Eberle, be very clutch. And I think same as what I just said goes in the same vein. I like what's going on in Seattle, so why not go back to Jordan Eberle, a guy who, in my opinion, was right there as the best player for the Seattle Kraken team this postseason, and a guy who's boosted his fantasy value, in my opinion, for next year.
Yeah, I like the fact that you mentioned Phillip Grubauer there, especially after so many conversations with our good friend Michael Amato, always suggesting to not take a goalie in the first 3 rounds, like let them fall down because you can find some sneaky good picks there. Phillip Grubauer being one of them, Jordan Eberle. I like the chemistry with him. Jared McCann, Jaden Schwartz. They're, again, second year now, finally getting things going. So there's a lot of players, again, that you got to look at in a new way, a new light for next season, because the players on the Seattle Kraken are here for good, and they're playing great right now, and they had a great postseason. But someone that dominated, and I know that this is probably the obvious one, but I got to talk about him. It's Roope Hintz of the Dallas Stars, top playoff performer for me so far, and for a lot of players out, or for a lot of fans out there too. 9 goals, 19 points in 13 games. Like, he is just popping off right now, and it's great that he's performing so well when Robertson isn't really getting on the score sheet as much as you thought. Like, he still has 12 points, but he only has 2 goals right now. He's not getting those bounces that we saw so much in the regular season, but Roope Hintz is stepping up right now. He's had 4 3+ point nights in the playoffs, and it's just pure dominance. And again, you and I have given a lot of love to Jason Robertson. You know, I've given a lot of love to Joe Pavelski, but I need to be showing the same amount of love and respect to Roope Hintz that I've been showing to Pavelski and Robertson. So that's my bad. Hand up my bad, because Roope Hintz, a guy that...
Well, we've given him some love. We've been held it down with Roope Hintz. I hear what you're saying.
I said my hand. Okay. My bad.
Well, because some people jumped ship. You know, at the start of last season, you know, he had some struggles, and I don't think you were ready to bail on him fully, and a lot of people did. But I hear what you're saying, Steele, and I just think like what you're saying is so right on par with. The man he's got 1 point less than McDavid.
Yeah.
For this postseason. I don't need to say anything more, do I?
The thing is, like, what he's doing right now, you know, and having back-to-back 70+ point seasons, he's 26 years old. I think after he's still got a Western Conference, potentially a Stanley Cup to show us what else he's got, but we're getting a quick glimpse of peak performance from Roope Hintz. Like, we're just getting a taste of what he can do. And I'm going to get to my next guy after I throw it back to you, who's, again, on the Dallas Stars, who I want to mention because he's been a phenomenal player this year as well in his rookie season. But this Dallas Stars team looks legit, and they look like they're a big threat with all of their guys that they've got coming up now.
So why don't we just keep this one short, because he's on my list too, and I have to also tip my cap to old Wits on the Spit and Chicklets podcast for talking a little bit about Wyatt Johnston. Yeah. But if you were catching some of my solo episodes when Steele was on his post-wedding heater about a week and change ago, I talked about a couple of the young players that I thought stepped out for me, Matt Nyes, Wyatt Johnston, and others. And with that goal that he scored and some of the attention that he's getting from other podcasts, now that they followed suit with the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast, please don't slip or sleep. Run that tape back. Big Flip was on Wyatt Johnston about 2.5 weeks ago, so get with the program. But he comes out of junior, Steele, and, you know, this is what I'm saying. Hats off to the Spit and Chicklets boys. He has his 3 years in junior split in half because of COVID. He scores 30 points in his first 53 games, and then he goes off for 124 and 68. And at one of the youngest players in the NHL, also shout out to a good Toronto boy in Wyatt Johnston, 24 goals in the regular season, Steele. This is a guy for me, and I hate giving away some of those under-the-radar picks because I've been saying it now for weeks. This guy's value next season for me just is going to jump right off the page, and it has a lot to do with his poise in this postseason, and maybe that game winner, series winner, is potentially the cherry on top right now for this kid.
Well, it looks like you and I are going to be going head-to-head, trying to draft Wyatt Johnston in the Fantasy Hockey League next year. Because, he's on the list too. He's a guy that, you know, at 20 years old, first-year rookie, top 5 in rookie scoring with 41 points. Looks great. Looks so common in the postseason, like he's been there before. And, you know, you mentioned all the stats there. I've got it on my notepad over here too. But I just want to add to that, you know, I believe I saw something after Game 7. The stat was the only player or the youngest player to record 2 game-winning goals in a series-clinching game in the same postseason at 20 years old. I believe that I'm going to have to check that out. It sounds right.
No, that sounds – if they're throwing that out there, it's him. Like, there's no one else to have done that. That's crazy.
For me, it's unbelievable to see something like that. And for the Dallas Stars, they're so lucky that they've got him on an entry-level contract for the next 2 years. And I bet you that Dallas and their front office just can't wait until both Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn's ridiculous contracts are up, and they're able to use some of that money to sign Jake Oettinger to a long term, Jason Robertson to a long term, and Wyatt Johnston to a long term, because Wyatt Johnston is going to be their second line center in probably in the next few years.
100%. I just don't know how ridiculous they seem after how good and how important they've been to this team's success this year, because I'll tell you this, Steele, that front office, Jim Nill doesn't miss very often, but I'm just saying they're happy to have those two veterans in tow, and they're playing this well and are big reasons why they are this deep in the postseason. Although I agree with you, still very hefty contracts that late in their careers. Yeah. We'll leave that for a whole other conversation. We got a couple more guys that have improved their fantasy value over the postseason for next season's draft. We'll come up with that around the break. Steele, why don't you take us there?
That one snuck up on you there, Flip. Make sure.
Oh, my bad.
All good. No worries, but make sure you
my bad. I just slipped that out.
No worries, man, but make sure you don't let this sneak up on you. This episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. They are the comfiest pair of pants or shorts you'll ever put on. You'll look great and feel even better with Bird Dogs. They're built for comfort and for versatility. Bird Dogs gives you the freedom to wear their pants for any type of occasion. Go out for a night on the town with some friends, a meeting with your boss, or even on the golf course where you're sweating for 4 hours. No matter what you do, Bird Dogs have the shorts and the pants for you, and the built-in liners are a game changer, which is why I have another order of gym shorts and with built-in liners on the way for next week. I know Flip's got an order coming his way. I believe it should be arriving tomorrow, so he can't wait to open up that as well. And they have a huge variety of styles and clothing like khaki shorts, Oxford shorts, bathing suits, joggers, and khaki pants. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL. When you enter the promo code LockedOnNHL, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every single order. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and buy some shorts and some built-in pants. They are the comfiest and most versatile pants out there. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all the love, all the support you show us every single day. Flip, top playoff performers. We continue the topic here. I've got one last player that I want to talk about, but I'll throw it back to you because I know you got a few more. So who's the next guy who you've been really impressed by?
Well, I'm going to just throw them out quickly because I think one of them is what you'd expect. And I think I had two obvious names written down here, and I appreciate that you wanted to talk about one of them in Roope Hintz. The other obvious one that we've mentioned at length is Evan Bouchard. So I'm not going to even go there. I'm not going to explain it. It's been obvious. But again, we've been on this man from maybe a month ago saying this was going to happen. So make sure you tap in for all of these offseason predictions, people. But also another guy, Steele, in Carter Verhaeghe. Who just literally cemented himself. Looking at the last 2 years, you might not think he's that guy. This year, this postseason, he is that guy. 5 goals, 7 assists. Been a big, big reason why he's 11th in postseason scoring. And I don't think many people out there, fantasy or otherwise, maybe before this season at all, have paid this guy any respect. So you need to do that. And lastly, Steele, this is an interesting one for me because he still leaves a lot to be desired at the defensive end and maybe in his all-around game. But hit me with your take on 3 goals and 8 assists from Max Domi. Coming over to the Dallas Stars in a trade acquisition that I don't think many of us paid too much attention to. But he's really brought some balance to the bottom 6 and actually, bottom 9, if you will, in Dallas. And I don't know what that means for his value next season. That's why I wanted to ask you about this one. But he's boosted my attention to him. And I think the value is going to go up because this guy has proven when he is healthy this year also, when he was able to play with good players, which it looks like he's going to continue to get in Dallas. He had a good year and 11 points in the postseason, Steele, 8 assists. He's got the 17th most points this postseason. Top 20 in scoring, you got to give him some credit.
Yeah, and that was one of my X factors for the Dallas Stars in the postseason was how good can that Dallas Stars third line of Mason Marchment, Tyler Seguin, Max Domi be? And we're seeing a little bit more from all 3 of those guys. Tyler Seguin has 5 goals. 9 points in 13 games. Like you said, Max Domi, 11 points in his 13 games as well. Mason Marchment has been a difference maker, not as much on the score sheet, but a lot more in the physical aspect of the game. So that was my X factor, and that has really elevated the Dallas Stars alongside with the great play of Roope Hintz. But you're right, Max Domi, what does that bring for his value next season? Because this guy's bounced around the league into a lot of teams over his NHL career so far. He hasn't really
bit of an attitude problem as well.
He hasn't found his home, and like if you're in a banger leagues, he might be great for banger leagues because that guy likes to drop the gloves and sucker punch.
Some bad penalties.
Yeah, likes to drop the gloves and sucker punch players as soon as possible when something happens that he doesn't like. So great for banger leagues. He gets his points. But again, you don't know where he's going to fall next year. Does he re-sign with the?
This is what I mean.
Yeah, I don't know. What is he on? Is he a UFA at the end of the season, an RFA for the Dallas Stars?
I'll look it up for a sec. here because I got time. But there was also
Max Domi's Max Domi's a player where you probably draft him 14th, 15th round. He's not really a mid guy.
I think in deeper leagues and maybe even in your keeper leagues, you might take him a little higher, but he's just looked really confident, Steele. And I think this is where, and in clutch moments, 11 points, he's chipped in on a lot of big time goals this postseason, spreading that depth around. He is a UFA also going into this offseason. So maybe that makes a lot of sense. He did make $3 million this year, but I just wanted to throw his name out there because when you look at that top 20 in scoring, and there's other names out there, so Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has 1 goal and 10 assists.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't boost his value at all, right? Like he's a bit of a ghost. But whereas you look at Max Domi's 8 assists, that to me boosts his value. And very lastly, Steele, before we wrap this episode up, because I think you're going to really like this one, and it might be the most obvious out there. Coming off of all the drama of the trade from Buffalo, the neck injury, the conversations, all of that speculation, he had a pretty good season, a really solid season, let's say, especially because he did deal with injuries. And this Vegas Golden Knights team has proven that they have the most pushback and most backbone of any squad out there from all the injuries off and on ice that they've had to deal with. But to me, the player that has potentially solidified his fantasy value for next season, maybe not risen it, but solidified it, and I know I'm copping out a little bit here, is Mr. Jack Eichel.
Yes.
+7, 6 goals, 8 assists, 39 shots on net, logging almost 20 minutes of ice time per game. To me, he had to make my list as players who may not have elevated his value, but for sure, after all of the question marks, because there were those, Steele, we have to be honest, he silenced the critics. His team is in the conference final with a really good shot at the cup, and he is one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason why, and he deserves some credit.
Look, I'm high on this player. I've been hyped on this player all season. So I love the fact that he's on your list.
And we've talked about it.
Look,
I just thought he needed to be on this list.
He's on my list as well. I'm right there with you. He has to be on this list. This is a guy that I drafted in both my fantasy leagues in the 4th round. I took a shot at him when no one really wanted to. And I thought, if no one's going to take him in the 4th round, I would be an idiot to pass up on him. I thought he had a fantastic season for the games that he actually played in. 66 points in 67 games. You're right. There's always the question mark with the injuries, especially after a surgery to that extent. So yeah, he missed 19, 20 games this season. He played 67 games. My math is off.
14.
Yeah, he
15
missed
games.
15, 16 games. And he still had 66 and 67. He has 14 points in 11 games. He's been fantastic. And again, that just goes again. Keep in mind, this is his first playoff appearance too. This is the first time we've seen him in the postseason. And he's got
still a young player.
Still a young player, 26 years old. He beats Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. But that's been the great thing about him being in Vegas now, is that he doesn't have that pressure of everyone eyeballing him. What's Jack Eichel going to do? Can he save us from this failure of a team that we're in right now? Buffalo makes the trade. They get better now. This is a win-win for both Vegas and the Buffalo Sabres. Vegas is in the Western Conference Finals.
We know
Buffalo's got the young talent. And again, you and I've talked about this. They're one goalie away from being a threat in the Atlantic and the NHL. So it's a win-win for both of them. Eichel's got his fresh start. He's playing great. He's showing up for the Vegas Golden Knights, and they find themselves in the Western Conference Finals.
and improved his value for next season, or at least absolutely solidified it as a guy that you're going to be definitely considering. Again, depending on the format, depending on how many GMs in your league, I wouldn't be bad. I'm saying he goes second round, Steele, considering how good he's been this season. Maybe mid-third round, depending on how many teams. I just think that's how much he's proved me wrong, Steele. There's a lot of being proven wrong on this episode, and that's okay because we're an honest bunch. But why don't you take us home? We'll be back tomorrow for a big-time Thursday episode. Hello.
Big-time Thursday episode. Carolina Hurricanes taking on the Florida Panthers. Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. We're going to tee up and break down that entire Game 1 action and series as well. Of course, Friday's episode will be breaking down that Western Conference Finals. Vegas Golden Knights and the Dallas Stars facing off in Vegas. To start off Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when the episodes are published. And again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there if you've got bets going on. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
September 20th, 2022, VMLYNR for Zeljans. Ad ID PFXE01210000. Spot title, 60 Mornings Are Made for Better Things. 60-second radio, full mix.
Mornings were made for better things than rheumatoid arthritis or RA. Zeljans tofacitinib is a pill for adults with moderate to severe RA when tumor necrosis factor blockers did not work well or could not be tolerated. Zeljans can help relieve joint pain, swelling, and help stop further joint damage. Zeljans can lower your ability to fight infections. Don't start if you have one. Before and during treatment, your doctor should check for infections like TB and do blood tests. Serious, sometimes fatal infections, cancers including lymphoma and lung, blood clots, serious heart-related events, tears in the stomach or intestines, and allergic reactions have happened. People 50 and older with heart disease risk factors have an increased risk of death. Tell your doctor if you've had hepatitis B or C, have flu-like symptoms, are prone to infections, or have ever had a heart attack, stroke, clot, or other heart problems, or swelling of lips, tongue, throat, or hives. Ask your doctor about prescription Zeljans. Visit Zeljans.com or call 1-844-ZELJANS.
For a third time in 4 seasons, the Miami Heat are squaring off with the Boston Celtics for a trip to the NBA Finals.
I'm expecting Jimmy to be dominant. I'm expecting the Heat bench players to step up.
The Los Angeles Dodgers rolled into the week red hot, boasting the best record in the National League after a sweep of the San Diego Padres.
This Dodgers team is winning with pitching and timely hitting, and those are things that will carry you through in October.
And the Carolina Hurricanes are facing off against the Florida Panthers in the NHL's Eastern Conference Finals.
This is a team that is single-minded in their focus. It's about winning the Stanley Cup.
For more on these stories, check out new episodes of Locked On Heat, Locked On Dodgers, and Locked On Hurricanes. Then check out Locked On's new series, Paving the Way. Each episode will highlight a different voice from across the network, a Locked On host whose journey in the industry has helped to pave the way toward creating a more inclusive and diverse media landscape. That's Paving the Way, presented by State Farm, available now on the Locked On Presents podcast feed.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today.